good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to yet another session of inspiring conversations. And as always, let's go through why I'm doing this. Inspiring conversations, it's all about creating conversations that really matter. We are diving into ways to connect deeply, break down barriers, and build moments that inspire trust and growth. Whether it's with your team at work or in your everyday chats, we will bring more positivity, realness, and impact into every conversation. And as you can see, we are live from Kópavogur, Iceland, and here is my hometown or a part of it. So I'm living next to the ocean and it's very windy today. So just to tell you, so it's not. I hope you will not hear the wind, but I am so lucky, and you are as well, because I had an opening this day, and I Torben Nörby, who I spoke with in January, I think, he posted this book on LinkedIn, and I thought, what the heck is dark leadership? And boy, oh boy, I am so lucky that Malcolm Higgs, co-author of the book, he was available today. Yay! Hello and good afternoon, Mr. Higgs. Or
Good afternoon.
should I say Professor Emeritus? Or
Malcolm will do fine.
oh, thank you, thank you. So we are also we Islanders. We are on first name basis. So welcome and thank you because you are busy, as you mentioned before we started. And this book, just the title is, it must be like selling in the bucket load, or what? I hope the sales have started because dark leadership, navigating toxic organization and transformational change. Like how and what and why and like, or should we go first with like, who are you, and then go into the book?
Okay. Yeah. Who am I?
Yeah, who is Malcolm Higgs?
Yeah.
Let's bring it on.
I'm. I suppose I've been an academic now for maybe 20, just over 20 years. But before that, as we say over here, I had a real job.
Yeah.
I spent a long time in consulting as a psychologist. I went into consulting, and most of the work I did, and I ended up as a partner with one of the global firms. It was around assessing leaders, identifying leadership potential, developing leaders. Um, and so I had a long period of a sort of passion for leadership. Um, One of my two passions, leadership and music. also,
Yeah.
I also spend a lot of my time playing music in a band. But the passion for leadership sort of came from working with so many different leaders. And one of the things I noticed was essentially the more I met different leaders, I assessed them, looked at their development, I found it really difficult to come up with any sort of common pattern. And so when I moved from, I decided, I'd had enough of consulting. I wanted my life back. I took a doctorate, and then I moved into academia. Initially, I was at Henley Business School, um, and that was a wonderful experience. But it was rather nice because it was an independent. It wasn't a university as such. It was a postgraduate business school, so we didn't have a lot of the regulation and box ticking to do. We had a lot of freedom. And so when I was there, I got really interested in exploring this issue of what makes for effective leadership. And got into the academic side of it, looked at all the research that was around. Absolutely amazed that I rather recently I wrote a paper called Insomnia, Try Counting Leadership Theories. because what I found is there are 47 different leadership theories.
Okay.
And I thought, hey, what's all this? And what I did notice about them was they all make the assumption that leadership is good. And then I thought, well, hang on a minute. When I sort of read the business press, you had Enron, you had the collapse of Halifax Bank of Scotland with Fred Goodwin. You had, trying to think, there's the fraud stuff. What's his name? Bankman Fried in
Yeah,
US,
yeah, yeah.
25 years. Even Sepp Blatter, FIFA. And I thought, hang on a minute. Leadership is supposed to be good. What's all this about? And that got me interested. And then I noticed, there are quite a lot of books that were floating around about narcissists and psychopaths and Machiavellians. And I thought, well, this is an interesting. Is there something here about this? And so I started doing sort of research work in this area. And it suddenly gelled with me, with my experience of some leaders. Because, excuse me, I'd worked with some leaders who behaved very badly. And I remember one case, as I was reading some of this, I suddenly thought back. I remember this case of a CEO of an insurance company. And I'd been doing some work with his strategy director. And I remember one day sitting in the office with his strategy director. It was one of these lovely modern buildings and sort of glass-fronted offices, open door policy. And there's this CEO, huge guy. He was about 6'6", that way and that way. And you could hear him storming down the corridor. And he poked his head into the office that we were in. And he said to us, I'm just going to shut the door. He said, rollicking coming up. With that, he shut the door, and opposite was the sales director's office. And he shut that door, and through the door, you could hear him screaming abuse at this sales director and, leaning over and intimidating him. And I thought, yes, that's terrible behavior. What on earth does that do? And I found out subsequently, it came up in the press about six years after that, he'd been taken to court and charged with fraud. And he'd engaged his organization in illegal practices. And everybody knew that they were illegal, but they were frightened to tell him. And I thought, there's something about that. So what is it about leaders? It sort of got me to two questions. First of all, what do we see? What are the behaviours of bad leaders? And so I kind of tease that out. And I did a paper with some colleagues, and we examined something like just under 500 academic papers over a 25-year period. We actually found 1,500, but 500 were really talking about this topic. And what we found is the behaviours tend to be bullying, coercion, intimidation, exploitation, taking control, over-exercising control over people, engaging in unethical behaviours, fraudulent behaviours, abusing their power. And actually, when you've looked at some of these, when they're abusing their power, it was to hide their mistakes, not other people's, And so we found all these behaviours, and they fitted into a pattern. I'm not going to go through all the levels. There are a whole set of these behaviours, and then you started to look at what's the consequence of these behaviours. And the consequences seem to be, in extreme cases, destroying the company. A good example, Dick Ford at Lehman Brothers. a 200-year-old company, highly profitable. Dick Ford comes along. He's a real bully. I read a piece in the London Times, describing what it was like. He said, it's like he's at war with the world.
Yeah.
Treats people like courtiers to a monarch.
Yeah.
He essentially intimidates people. Everyone's afraid to give him bad news. And of course, Lehman Brothers collapsed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you've got the collapse. But in the meantime, the stress it causes people, damage to an organization's reputation, lack of engagement, people lose engagement, which ultimately leads to poor performance. And you even get examples of people who are subjected to those behaviors, taking revenge. Whether it's leaking documents, whether it's actual sabotage, whether it's just taking time off and claiming, so they get revenge. They don't get it necessarily against the boss because they're too frightened of him. So they turn it to the organization. They say, hey, mentally they're saying, hey, you put us in this position. We didn't sign up to be bullied and harassed. Too afraid to confront him, but we're going to get our own back.
How is it? Like, we have the first comment or first question in the comments. Rab Bassi, my good friend from the UK, he says, very enlightening, Malcolm. So he asks, are leaders not a product of their leadership? So if they see bad behaviors from the bosses, like, and very few swim against the tide, how is it? Like, if you have one boss who is, as you were mentioning, the guy from the insurance company, and he has 10 guys or 10 people, how many of them would take the boss's behavior and go on, or are people future leaders? Are they, do they think about this stuff, or like, because you have been studying and it's like it's a long period, and you probably asked them, like, how was your boss and boss and boss and boss? Like, you have probably gone back. So what is your take on that?
It's a really good question, and in a way, it's quite. God, an academic would say this, wouldn't they? It's quite complex because.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take the bad, if the guy at the real top is like my example, I know it's a good example of how it cascades down, because there was a lot of bullying then going on in the organization at lower levels, and a lot of collusion with the boss. So, the culture that's created, if that behavior is tolerated in an organization, it will continue. But we went back further than that. We said, so we've identified the behaviors, and we say, they have negative consequences. So what causes those behaviors? And so we went back to look at the person, to look at what we knew about the personality traits of people who behave like that. And that took us to the areas of dark personality, which takes you into the classic, the sort of narcissism. But there's also other, psychopathy, Machiavellianism. It's known as the dark triad. I quite like that term. I always think of Darth Vader. But and this, there is real evidence out there that dark personalities. So narcissists are essentially, it's all about self-admiration. It's all about self-aggrandizement, making themselves appear big. It's about trying to do everything to satisfy themselves. But underneath that, they've actually got quite a fragile self-esteem. And so what they can't tolerate is any negative feedback. And if they do, they get quite intolerant, and the people are likely to go. I remember working for one boss, and he was an extreme narcissist. And he came into the first executive meeting when he was appointed, and he said, "One thing you have to understand about me, I love challenge." And so
Okay.
we had several meetings. He came up with his plan to rebrand the organization. And at subsequent executive meeting, the operations director sort of said, "I don't think it's worth spending that money. You come from a fast-moving consumer goods background. We're in a services environment. It's not the same. Brand isn't everything. It's efficiency and delivery, effective delivery." And he really started challenge, thinking this guy said, "I like challenge." He wasn't at the next executive meeting.
No. So he
Yeah,
just got fired
he just got
instantly, or
fired. Well,
what?
not in front of us, but
No, 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 no.
yeah.
Okay, he
So
was
yeah,
polite enough to like
yeah. So
spare you that.
that's the narcissist. I mean, the psychopaths are very sort of impulsive, risk taking, but have absolutely zero empathy. They're very aggressive, and they're paranoid. You they think nobody ever gives us the recognition we deserve, and if anything goes wrong, it's other people's fault. I never make a mistake.
Uh-huh.
And then you've got the Machiavellian ones who are very manipulative. They have no empathy with other people, but they've got this ability to read other people and use that information to further their own
Yeah, yeah.
needs. So you've got that group of personality characteristics. Now, what we see is that they can remain dormant. If you've got a culture of an organization that doesn't tolerate bullying, doesn't reward short-term results at the cost of other people, is very engaging and involving, then those traits don't come up. And those people don't often stay in that sort of organization. Those people seek out organizations which ultimately are about getting them into positions of power. And I have to say this, well, I don't know how universal it is. There's a saying that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
Which actually dates back to, is it 1800 somewhere? It was in a letter from Lord Aston to a bishop complaining about popes. So it is a question of power. And it's quite interesting because more recently we started to use neuroscience. We started to see how that works. And what they found is when people gain positions of power and authority, they tend to dissociate the empathy with others from their own actions, and they tend to take actions and they have no guilt about them, and they don't, they're not actions which aren't necessarily justifiable, but they're serving themselves, and it's a self-serving behavior which then leads to self-serving needs the individual lead to these bad behaviors. So if an organization will tolerate it, those traits will turn into behaviors.
But when you mention the guy, like if a CEO comes in, he is hired, or he or she or they or whoever it's is hired, and start talking about rebranding, and like, don't you have, like, how can you, like, I guarantee that you know how long that person stayed in job. Like, did he was he fired quickly, or did he stay for a long time and ruined the company, or like?
Yep, he ruined the company. He ruined the
So
organization.
the board, did the board just close their eyes,
Yeah,
or like did
yeah,
they do it like, oh, we can see there's something going on, and so
yeah.
when is it that in these cases, when is it that the board should step in and say, you were not hired to do this. Like you were mentioning
yeah,
by the insurance guy, if it's a new building with glasses and exterior and all the latest tech and computers and the like office desks are up and down and
yeah,
like
yeah,
whatever, like all for the goodness of the eye. Like, oh, this is a great workplace, but then underneath it is total
yeah,
rubbish. So where and who is to blame?
yeah,
Is it because when I become leader, like I believe that I'm a good person, but when I if I would become a leader, would I then change into a another totally okay, I will use the word DICK. Like would I
yeah,
turn into like a total schmuck?
yeah.
Like what happens? Why? Like what neuroscience? Why is it that you can't just have a flat or like how like who is to blame?
It's it ultimately it's the board
Yeah, isn't it?
because you know there are two things. There's a lovely book I remember reading. Oh, it was published about 2010 by a great guy called Adrian Furnham, and it's called The Elephant in the Boardroom.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I mean, he comes to the conclusion that you know that essentially, I'm not sure he uses the term dark leadership as such, but he's talking about the same phenomenon. And he comes to the conclusion that unless you deal with it at the top, in terms of, first of all, assessing these people, assessing people who come to the organization you're considering for a CEO. Um, many boards do not use any formal psychometric assessment, and these traits can be picked up through psychometric assessment. And there's a problem because people who have these dark triad traits can also appear to be model leaders because they're assertive, they have an apparent charm, which they're using to
Hmm.
manipulate.
Yeah, yeah.
They have a lot of self confidence. When faced with difficulty, they will lie. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, this one I'm thinking about, the branding person, he had positioned himself with the board when they selected him. I only saw this after the process. He had said that I can't name organizations,
No, no,
but
no,
he
no,
was
no.
responsible for a mega merger in his past experience. His face fell when he saw me because I'd been a consultant to the organization in the middle of that merger, and he was the HR compensation and benefits manager. But the board talked about this guy. He brings this experience of merger. You know, the boards get their selection processes, first of all, are wrong.
Yeah.
They're not actually diving in to make an assessment. I mean, really basic stuff like not checking out somebody's CV properly. And if you've looked at this guy's CV, it was 2 years move, 2 years move, 2 years move. Um, that should have screamed something at them.
Yeah,
Um,
and there are so many times that people, they, as you say, they quit after this and that, and then when asked, they're like, yeah, they were just like, and then they come, and everybody else knows that they have like a fire burning behind them, and it's
yeah,
just like horrible.
yeah.
But yet they get
But
job
also,
after job.
yeah, the board should be, holding the CEO accountable.
Yes.
You and so there is it starts. It's a very old saying, isn't it? The fish rots from the top.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Of course, and
yeah,
but that's why it's unbelievable that when you have a good like there is nothing wrong or like and then you bring in new people and they start to stir up things and
yeah,
leaves the
yeah,
company in ruins,
mm,
which and people they are so not compatible that it is just horrible.
yeah.
So and
So
many
finding those people, Yeah,
Yeah. But and many companies which were great in the minds of like the people, they all of a sudden just change, and
yeah,
they are just like, what happened? And
yeah,
all because of this one
yeah,
or bad
and
hirings.
yeah, and it's because of power.
Yeah,
But
and yes, and the power. But when you because you are a scholar, like you are an academic, and now because we talk about the book and dark leadership, and that's why like I was just like, what? This is intriguing. Like let's call it what it is, because people are like, you have bad coaches in football, you have bad coaches in sports and whatnot, and I urge people to check Amazon for and buy the book. Um, so how is it that we can, like you talk about in your bio, you talk about that you have like you have some assessment, you can make an assessment of people and stuff. Do companies use them, or do they think that they are almighty, like we know this stuff, because
yeah,
I have been in this business. I don't need any Malcolm Higgs who has
yeah,
like, oh, he can eat the potato
there
or
are
whatever.
there are a lot of companies who use assessment tools.
Yeah,
Um, Interestingly, they don't usually use them for the top level. We use them everywhere
yeah,
else, but not right at the
yes,
top. That's the first point. Secondly, they don't necessarily use the most appropriate tools. If you're concerned about hiring a dark leader, there are a number of assessments you can make that particularly look at dark traits. Um, and that can make you can, if you take it as a risk assessment process, you're not
yeah,
saying because they've scored such a level on one of these instruments that you shouldn't hire them, but you should say, hang on a minute, well, that person shows those tendencies. If we're going to hire them for other good reasons, we need to put practices in place to stop those turning into dark behaviours. So, we will have an excellent whistleblowing policy that's
yeah,
completely independent, that will stop it. And if anybody breaches our rules of behaviour in the organisation, then however high they are, they're out. So it's that sort of top level commitment to making sure. But you can use assessment and use it very effectively. Um, I mean, I remember one particular assignment I had. It was for a governmental agency, and it was in the scientific technical arena. And they were going through a period of staff surveys were really sending back really quite bad messages about the organisation. And in one particular division, the rate of turnover of staff, the attrition, was really ridiculously high. And I met with the CEO, and he said, and at the time, there was a lot of talk about emotional intelligence. And he said, what would be really interesting, he said, just to see if this means our directors are emotionally unintelligent. Yeah. And so
yeah,
we had a tool which I developed with another colleague, which is an assessment of emotional intelligence. And you could do it self-assessed, or you could do it with peer assessment or follow a subordinate assessment. He said it would be a very good idea to put the top team, including me as the CEO, through that process. So we did this, and we did the self-assessment first, and it came back. And in the meantime, we looked at the feedback on the staff surveys and the attrition data, complaints, grievance data, looked at a whole lot of data from the organisation, found this one division which was really problematic. So we looked and we agreed that the whole of the top team would share their self-assessments. And the director of this troublesome division, showed his scores on the 7 scales of emotional intelligence were at the top of all 7 of them. And everybody sat there and thought, we know this guy. He is dark. He really is. He bullies. He shouts. He's very dark. So we said, okay, now we'll do the 360. And so we did the 360. We had a follow-up meeting. His scores were up there for himself. They were down there. The biggest gap I've ever seen from his employees and him. They were opposite extremes. And so we used that data, but the CEO sat down with me and he said, this is an intolerable situation. He said, this guy who was the problematic one, said, he's incredibly intelligent and in his field he's a real expert. I'm going to create a role for him which doesn't involve him managing anybody, leading anybody, and put into that position somebody with a very different profile. So they're able to spot the problem, use assessment processes, and because it was important for the organization, the CEO said, no, we're moving that particular character. And it turned the situation round. Staff satisfaction started going up, turnover came down over a period of a year. It made a big difference. And so the culture in that division changed.
Yeah. But how is it? Because not are leaders, CEOs, who can see this, or a board, like in this example, like a great example that you can, like, because he is very intelligent and he can do stuff, but he's rubbish in controlling people. So let's make something else and create a solution. How many have you encountered in your research or read about for this book, like, who take action and do something about it? Or is it a well-hidden problem that when people, boards or whoever, realize there is a idiot controlling the ship, that they just discreetly push the people out? Like, could you put a percentage on, as you read stuff, like you go through a lot of stuff. How many are there, like you say, 10 reviews and one is bad, and what is the one you focus on? The bad one. Like you don't think about the 9 others who are great. So like, do you have such a, like, is there 50-50, or is it just 90% that they look, close their eyes and move on?
I think that well, it's a really good question, Hidden. In the work we did when we reviewed these sort of 500 papers, we found the one thing that was missing from all of them was, how do you stop it? These were academic papers. What causes it, what it is, what's the percentage, how do we stop it? So in the book, for example, we saw in these papers several suggestions, but they're all very lightweight. So in the book, we've sort of drawn on examples which are much more from practice when we've seen it happening. And I've certainly seen it happening in, I don't know, 20, 30 different organizations where people at the top have taken action. But I think it's quite clear the things that need to be done. And one good way, for example, is increasing levels of empowerment in an organization. If you can distribute power, which is a main attractor for people with these dark traits, if you can distribute power in some way, whether you call it flatter structures or whatever, but a greater level of empowerment, then that reduces the likelihood of those dark characteristics turning into dark behaviours. If you have a good set of policies that are really implemented in terms of accountability, looking even at reward, for example. Too many organisations, we reward people for achieving results badly. It's the 1 year
Mhm.
KPIs, key performance indicators. If you've got those, you've got a nice bonus. We
Yeah,
don't we
yeah,
don't actually check how you got there.
no.
If you've left a trail of bodies to get there, we don't actually count the bodies. You
So on every floor of the
yeah,
organization, there is just like,
yeah,
but
we're dead. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, again, I've seen an organisation who actually recognised that. They were having real problems, not at the top of the organisation, but in certainly in relation to change. They were in their project office. They were having lots and lots of problems with people, losing key people, lots of complaints, and failing to deliver on the projects because their levels of engagement were very low. And so what they looked at was the reward structure, and they said, yeah, basically all we're looking at in terms of what I call the discretionary reward, beyond salary,
yeah,
the bonus levels. What we're looking at is purely results and outcomes and boxes that are being ticked and numbers that are being put in. We're not considering the extent to which these people are exhibiting the behaviours that we value as an organisation. And so they changed their whole sort of reward assessment process to be not only what you've delivered, but input on how you've delivered it based on a 360 feedback from the people that are being led. And over a period of about 2 years, the whole climate in the project management area had shifted dramatically because they've made that change, that how we do things. And that really what that was doing was saying, we believe if we get engaged employees, really engaged, committed employees, that will deliver performance for us. That will deliver our outcomes. And actually, the leader's job is to build that engagement.
yeah, yeah.
But that takes time to work through. So they said if we stop focusing only on results, but focus on these underlying behaviours, then over the course of time, we're going to get a more sustainable and a higher level of performance.
But how is it? Because now I work a little bit. I am very interested in happiness at work
Yeah,
or well-being at work, and because when I study something, I'm a social
yeah,
educator, and of course I went into the kindergartens and worked with the youth and whatnot. And then when that was not enough, I evolved and I took my MBAs and stuff. But where is it that, because then happiness at work, there is a guy called Alexander Kierulf, and he talked about that results and relationships are in the end, that is like whatever this should go on, because
yeah,
productivity goes up when you have happy employees, and when you celebrate mistakes, you just, and you trust your
yeah,
people, you are
yeah.
hired to do stuff. So and then maybe that brings me to, because Rab Bassi, he asks, like, is micromanagement and control a sign of dark leadership?
Indeed, very
Which it
much
must
so.
be,
Yeah,
which it must be. But what happens when people, like, they start out with good intentions? Let's say, because that is the question before. I
mm,
start out and I'm very secure and but then something, a shift happens, and there is some failure, and then it's so easy to turn into micromanagement.
yeah,
And control, and saying, like, are you doing this or are you doing that? I have this assignment. Can you do that? And then you do the consignment. I have been there, and then, no, I didn't think about the assignment like this, rather like this. And it was just like, how about telling me then what you want instead of I have this assignment?
yeah.
Like, then you are controlling. So where is it that we, or can we teach? Because you must, okay, where to stop. You write a book and you go through a whole lot of words and like whatever you have quotes and you do, but we don't have what is missing in life is we don't have a school for leaders, do we?
No, no. Well, I mean, a lot of organisations would say, "Oh, you know,
Train
we
them,
train them," but you can't
yeah.
train leadership.
No,
You know.
because
But
you have to have,
I was going to say, I'd go one further. You know, we don't actually know what good leadership is. We know what good leaders are, but there's a difference
yeah,
between we've, you know, the, the insomnia paper I wrote. I said, you know,
yeah,
what you can conclude from all the 75 years research and leadership, we know a lot about leaders. We don't know a lot about leadership. Um, and increasingly, you know, it's becoming very evident that leadership is much more dynamic. It's an interaction between people. It's a relational process, and what it appears to be is that leadership is about the creation of a shared purpose, a real shared purpose that we can, you know, that everybody buys into, and that becomes salient in terms of driving people forward. So the leadership process is a process of creating that shared sense of purpose. And I don't mean, you know, the wallpaper purpose. What I mean, we are
yeah,
going to be the
yeah,
best. No, the purpose is, you know, why are we here? You know, we exist to do what? We
yeah.
exist to do it in what
Vision,
way?
yeah, vision, clarity.
Yeah,
Where are we going?
yeah,
Where are we heading? Are we on the same way? Yada
yeah,
yada. Because you can look at the football trainers.
yeah,
Who is the first one to go if shit happens?
yeah.
The trainer.
Yeah,
So it just
where
put it
does your
out.
new trainer come from? The pool of people who
Yeah,
had shit performances somewhere else.
yeah. But how is it that you because the young people today, of course, we all have. Do you think that the young people today are they striving to become leaders? Because many people, they are working, and then all of a sudden they show some prospect, and then they say, "Hey, you should lead
Mm,
this," and then they are just like, "No, no, 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 no." But they eventually do it because the paycheck says
yeah,
otherwise. Like it's good. It's good to have like a little bit more
yeah,
between your hands. And then they feel like rubbish and they are just like pressed into it and then all of a sudden people are just like, no, what is happening?
yeah,
Why you are such a you're a drag. Like why are you here?
yeah. It goes back to our selection processes, but
Yeah.
I have a maxim in terms of identifying or appointing leaders. Is
Yeah.
the best leader you can appoint is somebody who doesn't want to do the job.
Okay.
Because leadership, if you switch it, leadership is a responsibility and not a reward.
Well, yes, because you have to lead
Yeah,
the people. Like it's
yeah,
just like you have to
yeah,
find the common ground
yeah.
and stuff. Because and I just while we were talking, while we were like all of a sudden, Winston Churchill came up to mind because he was a great leader during the
Mm,
war, and people like he was the like father figure or however you would describe him. And then after the war, people were just like, "Yo, you are bad."
and before the war, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So like how you
yeah,
never know how what
no,
you show. Is it? Because you must, like, if you look at politicians, sometimes they are just like, and then when they get to power, it's
yeah,
just like, who are you? We did not sign up
yeah,
for this. This is just like,
yeah.
so
Back to all power corrupts.
yeah, yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah. So what is the, like, because time flies when you're having fun. I told you. So we
Yeah,
have like 15
yeah.
minutes just, and I urge people to just buy the book, get on Amazon and buy the book because this is fascinating. This is and you, I as I mentioned before, like I was so worried that you would be a dry academic that would only throw out numbers, and I would be just like thinking about something else. So is there any conclusions? As you say, like in this book, you are not. The final chapter is, and how do we stop this?
Yeah.
And then there is a blank page because
Well, in the book,
how do we do this?
we do give some examples and suggestions.
Yeah, okay, but
That's we've
would
moved away from the academic piece a bit at the end of the book.
don't be a tosser, just fire them.
Yeah.
But because when I was just talking to a young fellow today, he is very involved in startup businesses, and I was just saying, like, when you mention happiness at work, leaders they tend to just like, there's nothing wrong with my company. They back off, and they are just like, why should they do? Because why should there be something wrong with my company?
Yeah.
So what is your, like, when you and Sinem you were writing this book and you were going through all this stuff, and was there anything that surprised you? Because you, as you mentioned, you have been on the block for many years. So was there anything that, like you said, Malcolm Higgs, this is surprising, where you really had a discussion with yourself, like, what is this? Why haven't we seen this? What, like, was there something that came to light
Yeah.
where you were really
Yeah.
surprised?
I think one of the things that did surprise me as we went through this was I had come into it with very much an assumption the fish rots from the top.
Yeah,
What surprised me was a number of studies were looking at leadership that is going on in different parts of the organization when you have a leader at the top who is apparently doing everything right. We can say
yeah, yeah,
apparently. And so I think the one surprise is I thought going into this whole area of research, we were going to be looking very much just at the top of organizations. But it can occur at all levels, and it can occur in isolation. So, if we take the term leader, it's not just being top, anybody in a role
of a
of
lead,
a
like
leader
you have a
leading others.
leader, yes,
You know,
yeah,
that implies in an organizational sense, it's a power position, it's a position with some authority, and that can trigger the traits that lead to bad behaviors. So,
yeah,
you can find pockets and outbreaks of it everywhere. You find in public sector organizations, in charities, not necessarily at the top, it can be out in the field somewhere that you've got something going wrong. And so one of the things that surprised me, because I thought, well, if it's bad at the top, it's going to be bad throughout. So one surprise was it's not necessarily the case. You can
yeah,
have some pockets of leaders being very, very empathetic and concerned for the well-being of their people, very protective of their people, and seeing themselves as serving the group of people rather than serving themselves, because intent is a very important part of dark leadership. And then you can find others, apparently good organizations with a bad bit in it.
yeah,
And one of the things that we do suggest is that perhaps a starting point, if we've triggered any response in the book, a starting point is look at some of your data, because the stories and the worries are out there in the data.
yeah,
Staff
yeah,
surveys, the attrition rates, difficulty in recruiting in particular areas. I'm not saying it's all about a dark leader, but there are some signals that can say, let's look a bit closer here. And so, there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's not having to
yeah,
wait until you change your CEO. It can
yeah,
happen in lots of levels in different organizations. That was more surprising, because I did think we'd be reading a lot about CEOs and top teams. lot of my examples come from that because that's where I was working with clients. Yeah. And the other reinforcing point, well, the other surprising thing was really uncovering strong evidence about, people's response to dark leadership of being deviants. And actually, the individuals have a lot more power. So many organizations thrive on discretionary effort. It's not what you do in line with the job description, it's the extra bits you do. And just that withdrawal of discretionary effort can be very damaging. Even down to the point of, well, we do this risk assessment, that's what we say we've got to do. Oh, I can see a risk over there. No, that's not my job. So, there's a really, it's lack of understanding. So that was quite surprising. The relative power of small actions that can accumulate, when people feel that the organisation hasn't protected them. There's almost an implied psychological contract. I join this organisation, I give of my best, and they will support me and protect me. We never put it into words, but that's the impression. And suddenly you brought in this boss who's making my life hell. Well, that's you.
But how is it now? Rather annoyingly, Rab Bassi, he comes up with his question. And I'm like, why couldn't I think about this? Do you think social media platforms are creating more ego-driven leaders or more socially aware leaders? Are they is it more of a picture, like it's a photo op, or is it like there is this change in everything, and like when we had the dial phone, and now we have I
mean, I think that certainly to use a sort of broad labeling, I think there's increased narcissism. It encourages increased narcissism. That's not necessarily saying it's going to increase dark leadership, because there are two aspects to narcissism. We've all got a degree of it. Sorry, one of the other surprising things I came across was, I tended to think that narcissists were bad. It's a derogatory label. But actually, when you dive into it in more detail, there are two different types of narcissism. There's what's called adaptive narcissism and maladaptive. Adaptive narcissism is an acceptable degree of self-confidence, self-promotion. It's quite necessary to get on in life. It's only the maladaptive, the bad side of narcissism, that gets it. So, whether social media is making us more narcissistic, it might be of the adaptive type rather than the maladaptive. But it does. There are no doubt that some of the narratives coming through social media are narratives around power and power's ability to do what it wants, and power's ability to override ethical norms, and it's a much bigger question that's being raised there than just do I look nice, or is that a good photo to post?
I'm so great leader.
I was in there yesterday. Sorry, it's just creased me. I was in the lift in the university. I'd just been giving a talk actually on dark leadership, and I was leaving, and these young girls got into the lift, and there's a mirror at the back of the lift. They're all they're actually taking photos of themselves in the mirror, saying, "Oh, that would be a good one." Where does reality exist?
You were not a rock star. You thought you would be in the frame, but then it was just like, no.
Ready to sign.
Okay, now because we have 5 minutes, and Rap Bassi, he is just thinking he has been distracted. He says, and it has been a great session, Malcolm. But an important question: are all those guitars behind you, or are all those guitars like what? No, I can't read this. So that it is all guitars, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because he asked, or is that a violin on the wall?
Oh no,
Where on?
that is what's called a violin bass. It's the guitar, same guitar that Paul McCartney and the Beatles used to play.
Oh, and because the next thing was, oh, is it a bass guitar?
Yes.
Paul McCartney
Yeah.
style. And he is just like rambling on the guitars like rap. We are talking about dark leadership. Don't start talking about the music instruments. And it looks too small for a bass, and maybe a ukulele. Like I think you should get your eyes checked, Mr. Rap. Well,
Well,
and then he
tell
says,
Rab, I've also got violins, ukuleles, banjos, mandolins, balalaicas.
"What is like?" I thought he would be an academic. No. But he says narcissism is not all bad. Look at Hedin, he loves looking at himself in the mirror, and he's nice. Well, I don't like looking at myself in the mirror because I don't have to, because I'm like, I'm precious when I wake up in the morning. I don't have to do anything. What you see is what you get.
Yeah,
But
WYSIWYG.
as yes, as we have like this, you blow my mind, Malcolm, and you are fun, and you okay. We will dive into why you are in a rock band. So give us a little bit. Why are you a punk rocker, or are you a Beatle?
Oh no, heavy rock.
Oh,
Yeah.
so where are you? Iron Maiden rock,
Oh
or
no,
or heavy?
not heavy metal. So Queens of the Stone Age, Foo Fighters, Pearl Jam, but with a bit of punkish thrown in.
I'm amazed that you know these names. Are you like a teenager underneath all of that? And are you all at the same age in the band, or like are you?
No, we're quite a range. Our drummer is 23. So we've got 20s, 40, 60s.
And is it from the academics world, or is it just your
No,
family
the
world?
band was actually it stopped.
No, keep on, keep on, keep on. Yeah.
The band was formed when I joined Henley Business School in
Ah.
about 2000, and it was basically people from there. But there are only two of us left who were from there.
Oh, so this is like the Sugar Babes, like where
Yeah,
it
we're
just like it
yeah,
continues, and
it continues, and we've got some great musicians. Yeah.
nobody knows who started it and why it started.
Oh,
It,
we
it
do
is
know
just
who
there.
started it. The keyboard player and myself started it, and
Okay,
we're
okay.
still there.
But Malcolm, this has absolutely been fabulous session, and I urge people to just buy the book, and it must be amazing to read. Can you read it like? Can you read chapter 10 before you read chapter 2, or do you have to
Yeah,
read it like?
you can dive into it in different ways. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're all
So
neat topics.
yeah,
You
and,
go from chapter 2 to chapter 8. You know.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So, but is there anything that you like? You have written, you and
Sinem.
Sinem, yes, you have written a thesis, or like something. What do you call
Oh,
it?
it's an academic paper.
Yeah,
You know,
and where can
journal,
we? Where can?
journal.
Where can?
It's the Journal of Managerial Psychology.
Yeah.
It's
So
the one
we
I
just.
told you. It's got the title: "The Bad, the Very Bad, and the Ugly."
I love that title. The bad, the very bad, and the ugly. So you just Google Malcolm Higgs, or do you Google the bad, the very bad, and the ugly?
Google me. Google the
Yeah,
bad, very bad, and the ugly. If you go on Google Scholar, you know, and Google
yeah.
me, yeah.
and just oh, I am so glad that I saw your book, and I'm so glad that I talked to Torben, because he is you were his scholar, like you advised him on his
Yeah, his
doctorate.
supervisor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so supervisor, it's just like how everything just like click, 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 and you meet awesome people, and oh boy, you are just one of those awesome people. But I have to remind people that next week, this will be fun because I'm going to talk to Naila Selimovic. She is like, we will talk to from lean to lyrical, finding the human voice in process and performance. And I kid you not, she was an opera singer yes, yes. So this will be something somewhat of an interesting concept or conversation, where to turn from opera to business and think about lean and everything, that would be interesting. And as always, like I thank you from the bottom of my heart, Malcolm. It has been
been
a
a pleasure.
great fun talking to you, because this is just, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel, because you know that you can change this, and you don't have to, maybe just look inwards and say and be brave, like the example you made, that
Mm.
oh, he's rubbish in controlling people. What if he is just alone and he has a specific area to think about? And so this has been a great session, and he will probably return. He is returning, so this is fine. Hello again. So
Hello
you
again.
just, yes. But I was just saying that this has been a fabulous session. And as always, I want to tell people, like, be curious, be interested, and be inspired, because this is how we learn. And I hope that you take something of this, even though his book is probably this big. How many pages are the pictures? Are there pictures in the book? Are there pictures in the book?
A few diagrams.
Yeah. So just be interested and be inspired and go for, like, because then we learn, and we have to do it in those. It's TikTok is not everything, people. So thank you very much, and I hope everybody will have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank